He kind of looks like you.
I'm sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was mute.
Can't, let's see. Okay, everybody good? Any questions or comments before we start the day?
If we read Oedipus like 2 times for other classes, we have to read it again, or like define with like that background knowledge.
If you've read this play in 3 times before?
Twice.
Twice.
253 in like I think school, so like high school, so you know.
It takes like half an hour, right, or an hour to read.
Fine, I'll do it again.
Yeah, I think that has to be my positionally. Is like, it's hard.
Reading it as a political text, like you definitely get something completely different out of it as well.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I also think like, I don't know, like I've read all of these things a lot. I mean, I wouldn't reread everything every time, but a lot, almost every time, almost it all again. And I don't know, I find them really hard to know, you know, like there's just a lot there. I mean, I you know, you can, of course, if you've read it a few times, you know.
Well, I'll read it again because you're right. I'm not as smart as you, and if you're rereading it, like I need to be reading.
No, you are. I'm just like, you have the, you know, and times are tough and we're busy and you make choices about things. But this is sort of independent, just kind of writing off of that point. Like, it's always pretty amazing to me, like how much I don't know something I've read a dozen times, you know, like there's still like weird pieces and things you forget about in between them. And like you were suggesting, like the different context, like, oh, if we read it as a political text versus something else, you notice it very differently. And even just like putting it in with different texts, like reading it after the Bhagavad Gita changes what you see in it, I think. But you know, in the end, you make your own choices. But I don't, these books are all something else to me. They're just like the ability to read them multiple times and be still pretty puzzled by the way they work is perhaps a kind of argument for the course overall or something, right? Like it's just too much. It's a nice opportunity to reread it all again. Anybody else? Any other comments? Now that I shot that down, that's good pedagogy right there. Like always. You know. Good. Everybody's good. Okay. So here's where we are. Sort of. We're messing around here a little bit. But today we're going to talk about Sophocles, Oedipus. Hopefully have a little bit of time to talk about the movie. I hope you've all had a chance to watch it. Maybe. Yes. No. Again, Arjit has seen it, I know. And others may have too. I can't think of who else might have been in an earlier class with me where we watched it. I'm kind of interested in the filmmaker Pasolini, and this is a good example of his work. The piece plays so nicely with the reading of Oedipus that it's really worth watching. Yeah. Oh, is it really, Alex? Yeah. Well, see, this is an opportunity then to watch. You're pretty tired of Oedipus? Really? That's fantastic. But it's your chance to watch it against the movie. How's that for a different kind of moment? Alex, did you watch the movie?
No, I'm saying that I went over this in a theater class. I think another class at a different school. Two classes at a different school. Then I went over, and now I've gone over this class, and it's a very gratuitous story. I'll leave it at that. It's not exactly images that you want to continually introduce into your, conscience. So that's kind of my feeling.
I'll let that stand. Yeah. But again, like I think if you've read it a bunch of times, this goes to all of you who've read it several times. Like the movie, again, it's fun to watch the movie with it because it's always fun to watch movies where you know the where you know the story, right? You've read the book and you watch the movie and you're very aware of differences that the filmmakers are making to it. And also, and that's part of the reason to sort of take advantage of this, is to highlight the difference the text makes, right? Whether you read it, watch it performed as a play, or if you watch the movie, there's very different things going on, particularly in terms of the play. In terms of like the physicality of actors, and even in the film, the kind of physicality of these actors really matters. Though I don't know, like when the last time you all saw a play, but that's, you know, just to take a moment and highlight kind of like how stimulating it is to watch people on a stage in a way that you would think, given our sort of expectations of short scenes and very exciting visuals, you would think dramas performed by people on a stage would lose power over us, but I don't think they do. I mean, it's always amazing to me sort of how exciting it is to see people on a stage perform almost anything, right? Like even, I don't know, a high school, middle school performance of Aladdin or something becomes really compelling because of the people and bodies in it and their voice. It's really quite amazing. And again, I don't know if, I realize at this point in your life, at this point in all of our lives, it's impossible to see stage productions on the stage. They're probably, that would be questionable. That'd be good for them. They know what's going on. Yes, Justin, all the characters are played by men, which is true as well for even like Shakespeare plays. When Shakespeare was performed, all the characters were acted by men. It's pretty common for that to be the case up until fairly recent. But again, that's sort of an advertisement to, you know, when you can to splurge and go see a play. Yeah, Juliet was played by a man in the original performance, and probably for like the first basically 100 years of its performance, always would have been a man playing the role with good makeup and hair. Which is also kind of, I mean, if this is off the point, but for Shakespeare too, if you've read Shakespeare, seen much Shakespeare, there's a lot of gender performance in it. Like men who, you know, like women who, like you think of Merchant of Venice, it involves Portia, which is an incredibly kind of powerful female character he writes. She then dresses up like a man and performs as a judge. So you have a man dressed up as a woman, dressed up as a man. And you get this sort of nice, I don't know, like it's progressive, or at least it kind of troubles gendered expectations. And a lot of people would locate kind of our more common conception of gender as performative, as coming out of that kind of Renaissance period that we begin to treat genders in a bunch of ways as a performance, not as kind of built into you. And it's not unrelated to Shakespeare. It's totally unrelated to Oedipus, but you know. So again, and the next week we're going to hopefully, and the ones we really are going to, you know, crucially talk about, and they're really important, everything that goes on, is Euthyphro and apology. Like those become, I mean, Euthyphro fits in, kind of makes a crucial argument in the course about the role of language and how language works, you know, as does sort of everything. But Oedipus as well is very much a play about language, I think, among you know, other things like your mom. And again, we have 2 weeks of Plato, so we should have time to kind of be pretty flexible, and then we move on. Again, I stuck a piece by myself here. It's just for fun. I mean, it has no special credence other than you might like to read it and ask me questions about it. That's sometimes a kind of fun thing to do. Aristotle pieces will be on Blackboard. I'll make sure they're up there. And they're really just links I pulled off. I mean, I pulled the text out of the MIT Perseus files, but I'll put them up on our Blackboard account in a kind of edited form. So, you know, you don't have to kind of stumble through it so much or hunt around for it. And then the next week after that, and that's again, another place where we have some time to make up, you know, the fact we have a lot of text here in the beginning. The Koheleth is fairly short, and, you know, if we need to push it back, and if we need to take up some of that week for Aristotle, it'll be perfectly fine. Okay, questions, comments about that?
I guess I have a quick question about the midterm. Is it going to be administered in class, or is it going to be like
What I'll
a
do,
on our own time thing? Or
yeah, it'll be asymmetric, I guess. So what I'll do is I'll have it up there for a day, basically, or whatever, whatever sort of feels right as we, because some people are far away, I think. I'm never really sure where you are, but so I'll leave it up for basically a day. You'll have 2 hours to take it once you start, and then you'll be done. Does that make sense? And it won't take that long. It'll be fairly manageable. So. And we will review for it before we get there, so you'll know what's coming. Good. Does that make sense?
Are we gonna have class the day of the midterm?
That is a good question. I haven't thought about that. That probably explains, I have thought about it. And now that you bring it up, it reminds me that that's probably why we have that extra time on the syllabus, huh? Yes, that might be why. I don't know. Let's say yes, and then but I'll be thinking about saying no. How's that? It's always better to go that way than the other direction.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so I think yes, but I'm really tempted with no. But I'll sort of, as we get a little closer, I'll see how things are feeling, and how the workload feels for you all, if we feel like it's too much or not. But yeah, you should have just, Elizabeth is right. You should have just treated it as a course. You should have gone with it. That's on you. But again, I think I'll try. It's a little bit difficult to tell what the workload is like in this new setting, but possibly we'll just have it. I don't know if I believe you, Elizabeth. I don't know if I believe you. We'll if it had been back in the day, we would not have had class. Yeah, I don't know. So I'm tempted to not have class and just have it open to you. But let me get a little closer to it. I'll make a definitive call on that. Okay. Again, this is the city that this is mostly set in, or in terms of its performance, right? The play is about the city of Athens, and I don't want to lose that here in the beginning, because there's two other cities that make prominent and important appearances, of course, Thebes and Corinth. But in many ways, these are projections of the city of Athens, kind of thinking about itself and thinking about its own relationship to a historic past, right? There's the way that Oedipus is a Homeric figure, he's not in either of the two epics, except in a kind of gesture towards him in the Odyssey, where he's mentioned as the leader of the people from Thebes, which is a kind of important element to keep in mind, that one of the backgrounds, even though in the play it's hard to tell what happens the next day with Oedipus, a lot of the assumptions would have been like, well, he did what he had to do. He's paid the price, and he's going to kind of continue to be the leader of the city. And in Homer, he continues, right? After all, even though the Odyssey mentions, the troubles with his parents. But again, that's sort of like how a lot of these tragedies will work, is that they'll be kind of built around scraps of stories that people have been telling forever. And this is kind of an artist's attempt to flesh that out in a way that I think we're really familiar with now, just in terms of like in comic books or comic movies for us often work this way, right? They sort of take a figure on the sideline in one film and then give it kind of view of the universe and flesh out its narrative. It's a lot of backstory, I guess, here. This is a view from the Acropolis looking down on the Theater of Dionysus. And I really keep coming back to this space, in part because you all have been really interested in space and talking about the way architecture works. And here's a really good example of, or you were last week, I guess, or on Tuesday. Here's a really good example of the kind of the physical features of a space that helps consolidate a kind of artistic practice that then kind of maps into a building that even today we would recognize, right? So, I mean, this was presumably a natural kind of concave in the mountain, And as people, there were often these traveling bards who would come to town and tell stories, mostly Homeric kind of stories, and people would assemble to hear them. And after the 8th century, particularly with the success of the festival in Olympia, the Olympics, other regions started these festivals where Greeks would come from the surrounding area, or all over Greece come and assemble and sort of compete athletically. And most of these festivals had athletic competitions, but also compete in terms of poetry, and eventually, in the case of the Athenian Great Dionysia, one of the really important festivals, and the festival that's deeply attached to theater. The very invention of theater is as a part of this festival. That this is a competitive performance that's both a sacred ritual, i.e. done for Dionysia, or Dionysus, but also done for the city. And this, again, the surrounding Attic community, kind of larger than just the city. But for the Great Dionysia, you get a very large assembly of almost a total range of the men. You don't have to be a full citizen to attend. You could also be a medic, or even slaves could attend. Women, it's a little bit questionable, women's appearance in the Dionysia, whether they were allowed to watch the plays or not. And that may have changed, because those rules always, because over the course of hundreds of years, those rules change. But in the Panathenaean, another major festival within Athens, and one that occurred up here on top of the Acropolis, women were a kind of important component of that festival. But again, these sort of so part of this week-long festival of the Dionysus, and there were 2 other festivals for Dionysus. Dionysus was a really important god for Athens, along with Athena, obviously, and along with Neptune, kind of the 3 most important gods for the city of Athens. And Dionysia, these performances would be put on for the gods as part of the ritual. Over the 7 days, there would be 100 oxen killed, and that would either occur here on the stage itself, or back here in what's the more sacred precinct of the area. So as the plays are going on, they are sacrificing animals in the background. So you're here in the stage, they'd be sacrificing animals back here after having sacrificed them right on the stage. Saying all that to put the performance of this play into context, it's a very important theological ritual that's very tied to the sacrifice of animals. And as most of the festivals within Athens were very concerned with the role of sacrifice within the city. What does it mean to give up something for the city of Athens? And how do we reward and honor those who have died to sustain the city? And those deaths I would highlight here are not just human deaths, but the animals being sacrificed as well, right? These are sort of put into visual relationship with each other, that Oedipus is sort of sacrificing himself in some ways, and certainly other heroic characters do for the city, but behind them are these animals kind of literally dying for the city as well. So it's a powerful kind of structuring theme for most of the tragic performances, is this role of civic sacrifice, or sacrifice for the polis. Yeah, right, is that good? This trail right here is actually an ancient trail. It's been there forever, basically, since the Acropolis was developed in the 7th century. For people to take a walk around the Acropolis. It was always sort of produced as a visual, the Acropolis was always produced as a visual artifact for the people, around in the city here to see. This temple back here was started the same time as the Parthenon, but it wasn't finished until like the 2nd century AD, in part because it's so huge. It gets finished as part of the Roman conquest of Athens. And this gate here, I don't know if you can see it, but it separates the Greek city of Athens from the Roman city of Athens. And the arch says on it, here ends the city of Theseus, here begins the city of Hadrian, the Emperor Hadrian. Yeah, I mean, at least the Romans didn't burn down Athens the way they burned down Corinth, right? I mean, Corinth gets literally annihilated, like Carthage. Like the Romans just level it and leave nothing there. It turns out that, so in some ways, like if you go look at the ruins of Corinth and think about its relationship to Oedipus, it's not the same city. Or, if you read like, in the New Testament, Paul's letter to Corinth, as we're going to do it. And so Paul wrote a letter to this Greek city, or to the ecclesia in that city. It's not the same city as the ancient Greek city. The ancient Greek city at the time of Plato was totally leveled. Oh my God, I did miss the Monty Python reference. Shoot, that's super embarrassing. Is there an embarrassment, a way to be embarrassed here? To signify embarrassment? There needs to be more emojis in this thing. That was brilliant. Mauricio and Jack, really good work on the Monty Python reference. But the Romans level Corinth from the time of Plato, and then Julius Caesar actually rebuilds the city as a kind of reward for a lot of his freed slaves and freed generals, and that it gets repopulated by Romans. And so in the Paul piece, when Paul's writing to the Greek city of Corinth, and he's writing in Greek, he's writing to a city of immigrants who have repopulated it. Most of these people would have been Roman. I don't think Caesar did burn the library. That's quite a bit later. That could be. But the real destruction comes later. I mean, the real destruction of all the libraries around the Mediterranean really occur around the 4th century AD. Here's a view of the theater from down below. And we don't have time to talk about it, but this is an early account by Pausanias from the 2nd century, kind of what the theater would have looked like. Again, it's not quite the theater of Sophocles at that point, but it is a kind of cool accounting there. This is a scene I captured, I'll get to the play real fast, but this is a scene I captured from Assassin's Creed. And it's a really nice detail here that they are aware that the stage would have been wooden at that time. And it was a wooden stage at that time, not rock. The rock really occurs later, like significantly later, or the carved stone seats that we see there. But again, it sort of testifies to the long-term activity of this. And I want you to kind of think of it both as a political ritual, but also, both a religious ritual, but also a political ritual, right? That these don't separate. That for the Athenians to show up and to do this ritual in relationship with the god or in some sort of testament to the god is also to show up to make the city reflect on itself, right? This is an important moment for the city to look back on itself and to think about itself. And I'd really emphasize that as we think about these plays, or we think about this one play, that as much as sort of the Freudian read wants to treat it as a story of interpersonal dynamics, right? It's a story in which it becomes a universalized story of human subjectivity. I think that really separates it from what the Athenians would see it as, which is a story of political subjectivity, right? Like this is a story of what it means to be Athenian. And this is us looking back on ourselves and reflecting on it in that sort of way. Here's a sort of into the screen capture of this space. It's a really nice, like they've really got it there. I mean, you can even see the piece of the Parthenon sticking up there. And you can see much more of it here, maybe, but you can really, right there. But these Themistoclean walls are in nicely. It's really nice. Another nice thing, they put the animal sacrifice, the animal altar there, and a nice example of a Greek skene, maybe? The word we get scene from, which would have been a stage on which they could change settings and do decoration back there, and also could really make use of this space for the gods to visit, and kind of the sort of term ex machina comes from here, right? Where you could sort of have the gods show up and do something. A nice old shot. Yeah, thank you, Stuart. Yeah, I take students there every winter for a long, long time. So go for a week in Athens. This year, it's still possible that we will go. It's, becomes less likely every day that the virus continues. But supposedly we will go for the first 2 weeks in January, a week in Athens and a week in Rome. Here's a nice old slide, but okay. Now we're getting to the kind of, the text itself, I guess. But keep in mind, I don't know when we will know. I think the end of October, but these dates have been pretty flexible so far. And I think the fact is, like, if Italy and Greece will allow us to enter, it will probably be a go. And again, it's the first 2 weeks in January. I think we arrive in Athens on students are expected to be in Athens like January 2nd this year. And we're there about 2 weeks. And we do, so we're in Athens for most of that week is just in Athens. We take 1 day and go on a boat ride out to some Greek islands. And we see kind of 3 close Greek islands, including Aegina, which is very important to the whole history of the region, and a couple other islands. And then we take a day and go to Delphi, and you get to see some of the Delphi in the slides over the next few days. But we spend a day at Delphi, and the rest of the day, the times that we're in Athens, and mostly I have it set up so in the evenings we have lectures, most by professors in Athens. It's just nicer. And then we have a few tours, including the Acropolis, where you really want someone to take you, and you have to, it's Greek law. And also a tour of the museum there. And then a bunch of tours where, or a bunch of kind of assignments where, our hotel is right in the center of town. And so, like, you have to go to the Agora on your own or in a group or how you want to manage it. But the Agora is like half a block from our hotel. The Roman Agora is a block from our hotel. I mean, we're really kind of right in the center. And so, what I've tried to do is, like, we're in Athens a week, and a lot of it you can do with your friends in a small group, or by yourself or with me, how that kind of works. It's a nice way, I think, to break up, like, people can kind of manage their own day. And get out and see the city and explore it without being in a large group of American tourists or students. You can kind of get to meet Greeks a little better that way, and get to just sort of explore the city and what you're interested in, which really works too in the second week when we're in Rome. Also fun time, right? I mean, and you don't want to miss, like, going and getting coffee, going and getting wine. I mean, this part of Athens, the drinking wine, the local Armenian population is awesome in Athens. In fact, there's a whole kind of, Greece has a difficult relationship with a lot of immigrant communities right at this moment, but that has not historically been the case exactly. And the difficulties with Armenia are real, but there's a lot of the local Armenians. It strikes me that even that they sort of move right in pretty easily, and yeah, it's quite nice the way that local Armenians kind of hang out, are very much a part of the city already. And again, that's also true for other immigrant communities as well. Though Athens is, as you know, sort of dealing with some difficult kind of pressures at this point, and that doesn't always come out for the best for everybody. But the city is super safe. It's very fun. You can wander around very safely. It can look a little overwhelming sometimes because it's noisy and a lot of graffiti, but people are super friendly. The Greeks and Armenians, everyone's pretty nice, and likes to talk and help you out and show off the city. And again, our hotel is right in a nice place, and it works out well. And then we go to Rome and do just about the same thing. A few of the tours have to be all together. or need to be all together, just because it's very reasonable to go to the forum as a group and with a guide. And the Vatican, you really need a tour guide, or you really need, because the rules to get in are always kind of changing and difficult. And so we have a couple big tours, but most of the week, and in Rome in particular, I mean, Athens is a little bit simpler because most of what you want to see is ancient Rome and Byzantine stuff. It's all right in the same location. Once you get to Rome, there's a vast array of things. You know, as a student, you might be really interested in ancient Rome, and other students really interested in Renaissance Rome. And so kind of opening it up and letting students find what they want to find, and having sort of structured exercises, but letting them pick, really kind of makes it, I really like it. Like, it lets people kind of get out, explore the city, hang out with, meet people, go hang out in bars, but also go to do all of our assignments. It's a nice, I don't know, Nick, if we can get economics. We can ask. If I'll try to remember to ask, you can ask Brittany, who's in charge of the class, who's in charge of that sort of stuff through the GEO site. Economics will be tough, but the PPE, it can count. We can probably, if you're thinking about a PPE, there may be a way we could make that work, though I guess you don't need the philosophy or political theory anymore. But ask, there's always possibilities. We can play around and see what's there. But yeah, that was my spiel. So I would invite all of you to come. It's a fabulous trip. If you want to talk to other people who've gone before, I can hook you up with them. But yeah, we do. Yeah, let's go. It's awesome. And so again, in Rome, there's not only the sort of ancient stuff, but but ecclesiastical stuff. Like, we want to go to the Vatican, and again, people really have different interests, and so we have some things we all have to do together, but then these different assignments to send people out in the city. And again, our hotel in Rome is right downtown. It's actually right behind the Trevi Fountain, and which seems busy and crowded, but it also means everything is close, and it's easy at the point you're coming in late or leaving early. The Trevi Fountain is kind of there, but it's 5-minute walk to the Pantheon, 10-minute walk to the Colosseum if you're hustling. The Agora is probably, it's all right there. So, okay, back to Oedipus. A couple of things I wanted you to sort of pay attention to here in the play. And one thing I would highlight right off, and I mentioned this last time, that I think if you read this in high school, you were probably told that it was a story about heroes and about, sort of the problematics of a hero. And there's something really true about that. I mean, this is, again, Oedipus shows up within this conception as an ancient hero that a new modern city has to kind of think about their relationship to, right? So you've got a modern city with an expansive notion of who is a person and who deserves recognition of value. It's kind of becoming much more expansive than an earlier period, even if from our perspective, quite limited. But that this new population is kind of thinking about its relationship to these old godlike figures like Oedipus or Agamemnon, or like these figures are kind of it's a city thinking about how they're related to them. So there's a way that talking about heroes makes a lot of sense. It's also the case that these plays are almost always concerned with tyranny. The language hero doesn't show up in them. Like, it's just not the language that they use. The tyrant is the language they use. Again, sort of to drive home, I think, the politics of this. In a way, it's the Greek city thinking about the role of political power, the role of sovereignty in a democratic or democratically inclined populace, right? Like, what does it mean to be a democracy? But we do need leaders to have power that's not justifiable sometimes. And tyranny becomes a way to think about that. So again, the kind of ancient name for the play, though it's not the name that Sophocles would have given it. Sophocles would have just called it Oedipus. It wouldn't necessarily have had a name at that period. But the ancient Greek name for it is Oedipus Tyrannus, which is a funny thing, because if you look online, if you get an English translation, it's often Oedipus the king, or Oedipus Rex would be another kind of, we would go for the Latin Oedipus Rex. And a tyrant isn't a Rex exactly, right? A tyrant is someone whose power, and a tyrant isn't necessarily bad. They're very dangerous. but they're not necessarily bad. In fact, they can be quite good. And there's a whole tradition within Athens of bringing in a tyrant to kind of rule for 6 years. And if after that 6 years, they're done, they have to leave. And somebody like Solon would have been figured as a tyrant. They were not quite impinged in a way that a king, and the name for a king is not coming to me right at this moment, but it will. The other name for the king, that's embarrassing, is all I can think of as a name for like boy, like Kuroi. Anyway, it'll come. But the tyrant isn't tied in the way a king is, right? That a king is tied into the community around him. He has family, he has parents, he has a range of social relationships that keep his behavior in control. The tyrant doesn't have that. The tyrant is exceptional, right? The tyrant doesn't have an energized base that produces the sort of king's position. No, it's not monarch. Vasili. It's a Greek VB, vasili, right? So a basilica, like the word basilica that the Christians use to describe their churches, comes from the name for the Greek king, the vasili. And that's the king. So in Oedipus, there's one moment. Oedipus is called a tyrant throughout the play by others. When he calls himself a vasili. He wants to be thought of as part of the community, but he's not, right? I mean, he's a foreigner. He's coming from somewhere else, even symbolically, as far as I know. He is just kind of position of power based on himself. And as we're reading the Republic, I mean, Plato is very concerned about how the tyrant then has to use money to sort of empower himself. And that even at this point, the tyrant is often associated with money. Like a person who generates power, but not power through social commitment or indebted nature of obligations, but just sort of unilaterally has their own power. So again, the tyrant versus the vasili are the kind of two different categories here. The other thing to think about here in the beginning is, and I've mentioned both of these, but the idea that what we saw with the Iliad, I think, in which Achilles was commanded or suggested by Athena that he goes in a different direction and makes fun of the people around him, makes fun of Agamemnon, that kind of turned to words that we saw right away in book 1 of the Iliad. And one of the things about the tragedies, right? Like the tragedies are always attentive to words and how words work. But there's also like a way that they're not just words. Like they are assembled together in a theater. And when you're in a theater, you're brought to share your emotions, right? Like you laugh with the audience, you cry with the audience. It's not just an individualized response. And it's not just a specific response to the language. The language, you're also responding to this overwhelming kind of affective, the person on the stage is crying, that makes you cry. That sort of affective relationship between bodies, right? That the energy of the body really matters here. And I think, I mean, I can't quite follow the conversation over there without totally forgetting everything. But like, I mean, that's very apparent to us, right? Like when you go see a movie, that you laugh with the audience. You can feel yourself being moved even by bad movies if they kind of work on you correctly, or the people around you seem moved. It's not always the case. I mean, you can kind of fall off and start making fun of the people around you, but there's often a kind of overwhelming, you get swept along with the crowd. And I kind of think there about I mean, this is a phenomenon that's noted all along. But the way that it's hard to laugh by yourself, I don't know if you, like on airplanes, like when you're watching a funny movie all by yourself and you start laughing and it feels kind of weird. I don't know if maybe that we're losing that feeling.
You said that in contemporary, and we all disagreed because everyone my age laughs at memes by themselves in their room. Like, that's just what we do.
You really? Because
I do that all.
feel a little silly when I'm laughing by myself, especially like on an airplane where you're with a crowd. Like there's a crowd around you, but you start laughing.
Hmm.
I mean, I laugh for no reason at all. So, I mean, I'm extra crazy.
See, that feels awkward, man. Matt? Sorry, I mean, this, go ahead.
Yeah, so my dad also, like, if one of like me or my siblings is like laughing at something happening on our phone, he'll just like look at us like we're insane. Like what? You're just like watching this video and you think it's funny and you're laughing because it's a comedian who's paid to make people laugh and he's making you laugh? Like he just doesn't get it.
Maybe when we're on social media, we're laughing with like other people in a sense. Like we're not alone. We're with a crowd. They're not with us.
There's a certain electricity of like being in a crowd and like someone tells a funny joke on stage and everybody laughs. There's a certain community there.
Yeah. I have to say, like the funniest movie I think I've ever seen was Borat. And I don't think it's the funniest movie ever, but I saw it at the Arlington Draft House. And people were slightly drunk maybe, and they were roaring with laughter. And at some point you just can't resist it. Or I couldn't, you're just with it, you know, like that's where we are. But even regardless, whether I'm right or not, I think your dad is right. I think you should trust your dad. But that's part of, again, kind of keeping in mind that when you're talking about a play, yeah, me too. When you're talking about a play, like the sort of affect of it all, that you're brought in together here. The other point I want to kind of mention as we're thinking about language and words here is the way that, and it's really true in Oedipus, Tyrannus, that the words, that part of the tragic effect here, I think, is not just that you're confronted with the sort of regrettable parts of your own action, which we'll talk about in just a second, but it's also the case that you don't see it coming even though you're almost already talking about it, right? There's this sort of strange, and it really works, and movies do this all the time, right? This sort of foreshadowing effect where they're sort of cluing the audience into what's coming down the pike. And even if you don't notice it, you're sort of in the back of your head notices it, and so you sort of begin to feel something's off. And Oedipus really does that brilliantly, I think. Like, you know something's off because of like the way the pronouncements hit, the way he seems to be sort of saying things that mean more than he understands. And I think that the play really explores that, right? The way that the language we use is kind of beyond our control of it, right? And we've talked about this, I think, in the sense when you all were calling me out on like kind of appropriating these texts for our own uses, that I think that Oedipus here is, again, kind of very aware that you don't control your words, right? You don't fully control them. They kind of always go beyond you, and they're always saying more than you intend them to say, that they're always social in a way, right? They're not made by you. They're sort of put into movement by you, but they're not fully controllable. So again, there's this sort of wonderful way in Oedipus that he's always saying more than he means. And even then you can sort of see him beginning to hear his own voice, right? Like he hears what he's saying and responds to it a bit. And again, I just think that's a brilliant part of the play. I don't know, did you all notice that at all? Or?
I noticed that. I saw that.
Yeah. I find it kind of compelling. I mean, in a way that, like, you know, I think we're used to that in movies where they're doing this very deliberately, or they're doing it with us as a cued in observer in a way, right? And this feels a bit like that. I mean, it is that, right? There is a sort of way in which we as the audience know more than the players are playing it out, and that adds to a kind of tragic effect. But it's also the case, again, I think it just feels a little bit more like the way and again, it's sort of a story about how our words are more than what we think they are, how they're saying more. They're always kind of going beyond, telling truths we don't mean to tell. Which again, really, as you all already suspect, I mean, that's a kind of nice Freudian aspect of this, right? That for Freud, our words are always saying more than we mean them to say. And again, I think he's legitimately playing on that. You know, we could talk about the power of death, but time goes by so fast in this. But I want to hit the tragic moment here and sort of talk about what it means to call this play a tragedy. What do you all think of when you think of tragedies?
Sad endings, like a lesson that's supposed to reflect maybe like human failures. Hitting experiment one.
What? Oh. I still haven't seen it, man. This weekend's busy. I'll see it though, I promise, in some of this. I'm starting to feel really guilty about not watching Spider-Man 1. Darth Pelagius the Wise, he went really too far there. That was tragic? I don't think so, Alex. It's just not tragic, that's late.
It feels like big emotions, right? It feels like everything is slightly more intense than, you know, other things.
Yeah. No,
This seems to be the most theatrical of all the ones we've read, I feel like. Like the incremental understanding that like he really messed up, and like the way that they reveal each feature of the story and like piecemeal, and it like builds towards him being like, oh, is kind of climactic and cool. And I mean, not to say that the other ones didn't have that, but it was particularly suspenseful.
Yeah. That suspense, again, I think it's kind of an element there. Jack, you have your hand raised? Or you're waving?
No, I was gonna say it, as I understand it, the basic premise of like a tragedy is that it's kind of like watching a slow train wreck, but at the end of it, things are kind of put back to some kind of normal state. That doesn't apply to every tragedy, but I think like a core aspect is something is knocked out of what is normal and then is brought back into it, but a bunch of characters die or lose something along the way.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, that's a way that that's an important kind of historical account of the tragic, the sense that it has a kind of catharsis, right? That things get out of whack. It goes quite badly, but then there is a kind of reassembly at the end that, in fact, those phrases like cathartic comes from kind of discourse about the tragic. No, that's a good point. Elizabeth, you said Corona. Can you elaborate on that? Not to call you out, because I think that Corona is an interesting kind of place to think about it. Because I do think like thinking of like Corona's not tragic. I mean, it is. I mean, it is tragic in an everyday sense of the phrase, but there is a way I think that tragedy requires everyone acting. I mean, not everyone, but you know, from my sense, like the way I'm going to kind of talk about tragedy here, and the way I would kind of like you to think about it a bit here. Tragedy requires a certain amount of inevitability in spite of intentions, and maybe not even, I would maybe back off the inevitability just a bit and say like, it often is the person acting on their best. I mean, Oedipus here tries really hard, right? I mean, Oedipus isn't messing around and goofing off and making light of the problem. Right, like Oedipus doesn't come out and say like, everybody's dying, that's just the way it goes, you know, they'll get better eventually or something. I mean, that's not tragic. Tragic requires that he tries, you know, like that Oedipus comes out and is like, I'm going to do everything I can to solve this problem. I'm going to save these people. But in doing so, you know, he's now coming upon his own demise. And he's actually his saving them, I mean, a couple of things actually, the sort of background story in which his actions that were all quite reasonable turn out to have terrible consequences. But then here in the play, like he's living up to the demands of those consequences. Right? And I think like that's two important parts here is this, the unintended consequences of your actions, right? Like you may act in the best of modes, right? You may do the right things, but there is no guarantee that the right things are going to come back to you. And again, the sort of background of play. And I think about that, again, as we've thought about it in terms of Achilles as well, where Achilles is sort of angry in the same way, where he's angry in a kind of tragic way. But like Achilles, I don't think Oedipus bears any blame, right? I mean, I think, and this goes back to, I think RJ sort of said this as well, but like Oedipus begins the story, right, by doing the right thing. Like he gets the sense that he's destined to kill his father and marry his mother, and he leaves town, right? I mean, he does a very reasonable step of like, I don't want this to happen. Action is required of me. And you know, there's a sort of heroic mode there in thinking your actions can change the world. He steps out and tries to change the course of that event. He doesn't, obviously, and fails. And in that sense, again, he acts with the best intentions. Those intentions don't match what the world returns to him. He now has to kind of live up to this failure, a failure that is his, though not quite his, not willed by him. And again, I would say that he does that, right? That he sort of steps up and lives up to the consequences of his actions. But again, I would lodge the tragedy in kind of those two moments. One of the sort of unintended consequences of your actions and the drive to kind of live up to those consequences, right? So as much as I agree with you all, when we talk about the sort of sadness to tragedy and kind of disappointment to tragedy, I think for the Greeks, there's a sort of different emotion to it. It's not just that those stories aren't sad, because they are sad, but it's that they're also kind of heroic, right? I mean, the way that a tragic figure is living and doing something that's required of them, even if it means their own demise, even if you know, they're sort of willing to put everything on the plate for it. Stuart, you have something?
Yeah, it feels kind of like, because like he does have flaws though. Like I feel like his ego is really what gets him in trouble a lot of times. I feel like that he feels like he has choices. Like he has the choice of like getting away from this kind of prophecy that he has. And even when like Creon is calling him out, being like, hey man, like obviously like they say something's up and you should deal with it. He, instead of being like, all right, I should like listen to the gods, he says, no, like I can do it. I'm the one in charge. You know, how dare you? You're actually just trying to steal my throne from me. Instead of like listening or like thinking that possibly things could be outside of his own control.
Yeah, no, that's totally a good point. And I think there's more there too, right? In his failure to, the willingness on his part and Jocasta's part to be skeptical about the prophecies all around them. And on Jocasta's part, I think it becomes kind of very troubling even, that her willingness to suspend these, you know, to sort of question the gods saying something to her is even more pronounced in a way. Which is part of the sort of thing too, like you wonder like, what's her perspective on all this? Which I think the movie really sort of captures things from her perspective a bit in a way that's pretty useful. But yeah, no, I think that's right. I'm still sticking with my claim though. I think that by and large, Oedipus's failures are pretty sympathetic failures. I mean, his response to Creon is really the failure of the position a bit, you know, like that when you become a tyrant, you now sort of become, the status of that position becomes something you're very attentive to. But I think that getting there, there's a way that I don't want to lose the fact he seems to try. You know, like he really, again, he does try to save his parents in the beginning. He does try to save the city. And as he himself ramps the stakes up on that, he never shirks it, right? I mean, he blames Creon here because it's still sort of viable that there could be a plot to set him up like this. But but that always seems sort of, it feels like more like he's angry, not that he's ever not willing to carry it out. Do you know what I mean? Is that, am I being too defensive there? Arjit, do you have something?
I read a thing where someone was comparing Nixon to Oedipus at some point. Like Nixon is a tragic Greek figure, sort of. And like the idea is that like, cause he was always very paranoid and like insecure his whole life, right? And he's always had this idea of like people trying to get to him and like take him out. And like, it wasn't necessarily the case, but like he kind of built up in pushing against that. He kind of built up his own demise, like in like trying to, it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy what he did. Cause like he believed this, that there was like a whole like cabal out there somewhere to get him. And in counteracting that, he actually what removed himself. He's the one who was his own undoing. And someone described it as like a Greek tragic figure. I thought that was interesting. Like Nixon is a tragic figure.
It is. I mean, I'm not willing to go there. in part because it's hard to, I mean, I think that kind of works if you think about Nixon in America, right? Like, oh, American presidents, if you think of their consequences as just playing off within the polis, I think you could sort of do that with a bunch of presidents, right? Where they sort of become kind of tragic. The problem with Nixon and probably all the sort of, modern presidents is that you don't get to be tragic if you're killing 1 million Cambodians. You know what I mean? I mean, right? Like you have to sort of account for the fact that there's this massive violence he's actually implicated in, even as he has a sort of self-pitying, and even sort of persona of willing to sacrifice in the end for the nation or something. But a willingness to continue a war and kill Americans and Cambodians in order to get reelected seems un-Oedipal, right? I mean, it doesn't seem like Oedipus isn't doing that. Oedipus is trying to keep the Thebians alive because they're dying and he wants to save them. I get the temptation to say Nixon's that way, but I mean, again, at the point you're willing to kill thousands of Americans and thousands of Cambodians, Vietnamese, and Laotians in order to make sure you don't have to fail at this war, even though you know you're going to fail and withdraw all these troops, that's not tragic. That's monstrous. That would be my.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, I think that brings up a really crucial. I think that brings up a really crucial point about what makes tragedy work or doesn't work. Is you have to be able to sympathize with the tragic figure to find him tragic. Like right there, whether or not Cambodia was justified, you don't feel that way. And so you fail to sympathize with Nixon. And so you also fail to find him a tragic hero. And I think that's key to any tragic figure or for tragedy to work, is that the person you sympathize with has to have the raw end of the deal, so to speak.
Yeah, no, that seems true to me, right? And you're really right to highlight the fact it's about a kind of identification too, right? Like, can you identify with this figure? Which I think really helps situate it, kind of remind us that the play is situated in the city of Athens in a civic festival where the city is reflecting back on its behavior, right? Like how, and these tragedies often have kind of play historically significant moments in Athens as the city thinks about its own political action. So like the Persians, Aeschylus is Persian, the Persians, I mean, that's a story where, the Athenians are watching a play about the Persians being killed that's put on right at the moment that the Greeks are killing Persians. And a play is really, it does a lot of things, but at some place, it's like really just to remind you that, if you're in Athens, it presents Persian mothers crying for their children. And that's a bit of a tragic thing in the sense of, the place where the city asks itself, is this worth killing these children over? And again, I think in a way like Oedipus, kind of asking like, is this a burden we're willing to bear? Like, are we willing to kill people in order to do whatever it is we're doing domestically or within the polis? Are we willing to leave so many mothers without their children? And I would say the tragic really, and again, I think this is why we go to language of like sad and, you don't get what you deserve kind of thing. But the sense too of like a polis trying to confront itself with its own dark side a bit, right? That there's sort of dead bodies in our basement that we need to confront, right? So I think like the movie on Netflix about the Central Park 7, Central Park 5, right, where you sort of again kind of see and all of this. I mean, all the kind of Black Lives Matter popular production around it. Thank you, Con. Is often a kind of has a sort of tragic feel of like we need to see what we have done and think about how we live up to the things we've done wrong. Right? Like tragedy requires that kind of self-reflective moment, I think, or at least tragic in this very specific way that I would like us to think about Oedipus, right? That it's not just Oedipus theorizing his own mistakes he's made, but it's also meant to encourage the city that a proper kind of tragic orientation to the world requires that we reflect on the ways we have participated in, maybe not killing off our father or sleeping with our mother, but that we have also we're the source of the sin that the polis lives with, So that I would kind of put that, I mean, again, I like all your comments on the tragedy. And I would kind of add that extra twist of, or extra little element that it's about the city, that part of it is the city reflecting on itself, right? And kind of thinking about the bad that it's done and what it might mean to live up to that. Living up to it in the sense of, like you've done wrong, how do you make that wrong? You can't make the wrong right, but you can try to treat the wrong as a goad to being better, right? Or to fix. I think that needs fixing. Which again, I think like the Netflix movie on the Central Park 5 was quite. Again, watching it had a kind of feel of like, oh, America needs to watch this and watch what it's done and what it continues to do in a way, and not deny those sorts of actions and try to live up to it. And by live up to it, I mean like be better than that. And again, I think tragedy kind of operates in that mode. Anybody else on this? Yeah, Connor, I think that, I mean, responding to Connor's point there, like, it does seem like Oedipus does a bit of both, right? I mean, Freud isn't wrong to read this as an individualized story, but it's also the case that we're watching it in a theater and we're watching it as a story of consequences that the city itself is kind of thinking about, its relationship to a tyrant that may go too far or something like that. This is one of the sort of pieces I pulled out about the tyrant here. Again, often tied to sort of individualized money and wealth. Scales of precipitous heights, grasps, and again, sort of by himself here, then topples over and lies in ruin, no foothold on that dizzy steep. And again, that's sort of like that the tyrant is isolated in his actions in the city. This is just the sort of sites of various sacrifices. And this is the kind of animal sacrifice that would have been going on in the background. Okay. And again, here's the sort of language here of Oedipus, my sovereign lord and king, thou seest how both extremes of age besiege thy palace altars, fledglings hardly winged with gray beards and bowed with years, priests as I am of Zeus, and these the flower of thy youth. I guess this is a place where Oedipus is looking on the city and trying to figure out what's wrong and what he can do to fix it, right? I mean, so again, like the way this figures into a story of the city, wanting to know itself and wanting to know like what can make it right. We can skip over this because time is short, but just sort of pull up some of the Greek text to kind of look at the language that they're using to describe the political power here, which isn't quite clearly connected to English words, but is often kind of connected to things like the archon, which is a word that shows up for us in archaeology, like it's sort of the study of the first. And the sovereign here, sovereignty is kind of figured often as a kind of first position. This is a picture of modern day Thebes, by the way. It's not a great picture. It's just sort of a drive-by picture. But if you drive from Athens to Delphi, you go right by Thebes. And I like the big rain gutter there, sort of rain gutter. Again, sort of going back to that sort of sense of language as speaking beyond beyond what you might mean. Art thou not he who, coming to the town of Cadmus, freed us from the tax we paid to the fair songstress, to the Sphinx? Nor hast thou received prompting from us or been by others schooled, no, by God inspired. And again, that's sort of like that, the ideas we have are, the gods are implicated in that, right? And they can't be separated. And this sense of blame that the play is putting into place, it, as we saw with the Iliad, it isn't just Oedipus's fault, right? I mean, a lot of this is the god's fault. No, by a God inspired, so all men deem and testify, didst thou renew our life. And now, O Oedipus, our peerless king, and here it's tyrant, all we thy votaries beseech thee, find some succor, whether by a voice from heaven, whispered, or haply known by human wit. Again, the kind of ways that the speakers to him are figured as voices that you listen to and kind of interpret. And this is a process that comes out of the Oracle of Delphi very much, the kind of idea that the gods say something and interpretation is required, kind of a rabbinical practice, right? That the words don't tell you what they mean. They require more than that. That words are not plain spoken, right? Words always contain kind of shading of more meaning. Jumping to Oedipus, my poor children, known too well, the quest that things you hither and your need. Ye sick and all, well wot ye yet my pain. How greater than yours, outtops it all. And here's where you sort of, and I don't know if you bought this or not, but where Oedipus suggests that his own pain is greater than the pain of the city because he feels it not only as a person of the city, but as the representative of the city as well. And this is did you all kind of buy that or no? Because that's a place I think you could read him as just sort of full of bullshit, right? Like it actually doesn't harm you as much and you're just sort of messing around. But I think the play overall suggests that he's, again, very committed to fixing this problem. And very committed in a way too, I mean, and at this point one of the earliest kind of moments where you kind of see a doubleness within the figure of the sovereign, that the king is both kind of a person like the rest of us, but something a little bit more than that. And in some sense takes all of us into them. Therefore you rouse no sluggard from daydreams. Many, my children, are the tears I've wept, and threaded many a maze of weary thought. Thus pondering one clue of hope I caught, and tracked it up. I sent to Menopheus' son, Creon, my consort's brother, to inquire of Pythian Phoebus at his Delphic shrine, how I might save the state by act or word. And now I reckon up the tale of days, since he set forth, and marvel how he fares. 'Tis strange, this endless tearing, passing strange. And the play kind of plays on that a lot, the sort of notions of like, this is strange. Something's weird and strange about all this. But when he comes, then I were base indeed if I perform not all the God declares. And of course, he is going to perform these deeds, right? He is going to live up to, yeah, no, that's right. And thy words are well timed, even as thou speakest, that shouting tells me Creon is at hand. So again, and at this point, Oedipus comes to kind of face the words not only of his brother-in-law, but also the words of the priest of Apollo, the Delphic oracle. I showed you this earlier, I think, yeah. This is the Delphic oracle. This is Delphi. And that building there used to be all kinds of those little buildings around in the treasuries that the city put up. This is a theater. Delphi also had its own festival every 4 years, the Pythian Games, and the games were named for the Python, right? That is again evoked in that translation of Oedipus. And this is the temple of Apollo here. It is up on Parnassus. Yeah, it's on this. And if you could turn to the left, you could see some nice craggy. I might have pictures of that, but you can sort of see the crags as you go up. And on top of it, there's actually, in the winter, a ski resort now. But this is where the temple in which the priestess would have passed on some sort of word, if you were there on the right day to get a prophecy, to the priest, and the priest would then transfer that prophecy to you, the supplicant who came to hear the story or to have their question answered by the priestess. And there's a whole kind of story. I mentioned this, I think, again, about the displacement in the Iliad between earlier notions of gods and later notions. I mean, this kind of shift between the priestess who consulted with the Python, and the Python sort of supposedly lived in this maze beneath the building. And you used to be able to go down the side and sneak in that, kind of crawl into these tunnels back here. But you can't do that anymore. But this is, again, a kind of sense that the priestess, under some sort of spell by the Python, the sort of goddess, or by Apollo later, would tell the priest of Apollo these secrets. They would pass it on. This plays out to be really important in the next couple texts, right? Not only is it crucial to what's going on in Oedipus, that Oedipus hears that his parents are told, particularly, it echoes for Jocasta, but the parents are told that this child will grow up and kill the father and sleep with the mother, leading to their sending the banishment of the child from the city of Thebes. And Thebes is really kind of at the bottom of the mountains here. It's right before you start to climb up into the Parnassus. All of these mountains are called Parnassus. But again, so there's that initial prophecy by the priestess. There's that prophecy that Oedipus then hears about and responds to and gets his own here. The sense that, in which he's told he's going to do this as well and tries to correct that course. And now the prophecy where he's told that once again, he's the one to blame, or he's told that he's the one to blame. And at this point, he's trying to, again, kind of respond. And I think highlighting that kind of maybe provides some background that, there's a bunch of prophecies leading up to this, all of which Oedipus has, or both of which Oedipus has struggled against, right? He tried not to do this. So there is a sense that as this play is coming out, or as this story, as what is going on is unfolding, it's even kind of more clear that he's suppressing this background knowledge. But it's also more clear that he has reason to believe it's not true. Like, he knows his parents, right? He knows he didn't sleep with his mom. He knows he didn't kill his dad. So there's a way, like, again, it's both a kind of more deep repression, but also a kind of more, he knows the truth or something. Or he's fought against, he's tried to fix this problem. But Delphi's fantastically gorgeous place to go, by the way. And you can see on this day, it's actually a nice day. You just had this nice mist down the valley here, and all these kind of fabulous olive trees down here, some of which are 2,000 years old, down in this valley. And the valley if you would head off to the right, it's one of the 2 or 3 biggest olive groves in the Mediterranean, and certainly in Greece. I think it's the Amphissa olive grove. And again, some of these trees are thousands of years old, which is a kind of amazing thing about olive trees. They can last thousands and thousands of years and still bear fruit. So Creon kind of reports this. King Phoebus business straight to extirpate a fail pollution that infects the land. And I want to kind of hit this just a little bit. Oh God, we're out of time. Shoot. Okay. But let me just highlight this point here. That it isn't the way that you, me, and Freud are going to read this, is that a crime has been committed, and particularly Freud, right? And again, I think us in a way, like, there's a law, and for Freud, there's a primal law that you can't sleep with your mom and you shouldn't kill your dad. But mostly for Freud, it's you shouldn't kill your father, and you shouldn't sleep with your mom. And for Freud, like part of this is a little bit like, it's not clear why that's such a wrong thing. But it functions as a primal command, right? Which means like it doesn't even need to have a reason. It just sort of functions to explain to us, it's just a law, right? It's pure law at that moment for Freud. He does a few other things with it, which hopefully we'll have time to talk about. But here for the Greeks, and again, I think for us, there's like, okay, he broke that law and has to do the time, has to do the punishment for breaking the code, our public code. That's not the language of the play though, right? The play is this language of like, there's a pollution, there's a stain. I think that's the next translation I pull up here, right? There's a stain, a pollution, a stain. And here you get that it kind of functions as a sickness, right? And I think like, kind of put that in your mind for a while. Like, it isn't the case that Oedipus committed a crime. It's that Oedipus participated in a sickness of the city. He's responsible the way somebody who's sick is responsible. And in that sense, he is, again, like that needs to be thought of, that it becomes a matter of extirpating that or cleansing that stain, absolving,
Yo, did he freeze?
Yep.
Yeah, I think he got disconnected actually.
Tragic.
Or just his internet crapped out. I mean, it happens. I'm not.
Does that mean class is over?
I'll give it until 2:50. I'll give it like 2 minutes to see if he comes back because I know he was talking even though he's already gone. Oh.
Sure.
Hey, look, Mauricio is the host now. Okay, I guess you're the teacher now, Mauricio. So what are we gonna learn now?
Yeah, what's next, bro?
Y'all watch Naruto?
Share the screen, bro.
All right, so like ninjas, like you gotta control your chakra as you make your way up the tree.
But what does Freud have to say about that? That's essential to this class.
You guys hear about this Borat 2?
This what?
Is that for real?
Yeah, they're making a Borat 2.
All right, can you spell that? Like, what'd you say?
They're making a Borat 2.
And trying to salvage 2020.
Yeah.
Nope, you can't do it. This year is like a toxic dumpster fire.
I don't know, man. Borat 2 probably won't be good. The Borat was like 2006. I don't think they can bring it back.
Sacha Baron Cohen's
Most of the humor isn't allowed anymore. That like what
It's
we-
too offensive.
Yeah.
Did you ever see the Ali G show where he used to go on as Borat all the time? Because it wasn't just that movie.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Charmilla is a tragic figure of a tragedy because he lost control of his own Zoom meeting.
Bro, we should watch Borat in this class.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna leave. Okay, bye.
Nice.
I don't really got anything else to do, man.
Yeah.
So apparently in the movie Borat, he's so well known, the character. The plot of the movie is that Borat has to go undercover to interview people. Borat playing Cohen, like Sacha Baron Cohen. So like Borat is like going to talk all like because there's really leaks about like what he's done. He went to like a Unite the Right rally. He went to.
What?
He's been.
So-
Filming has been spotted all over the country.
He did that show on HBO, I think.
Yeah, but this was after This Is America season 1 was done, and he
Okay.
was spotted in the Borat outfit.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't think I think he's lost his luster, so to speak.
You
I
think
don't know.
Sacha Baron Cohen isn't Borat material anymore?
I don't think so, man. I think his sort of more dramatic roles are good now, but I don't know. If you go back and watch the stuff from like 2003, 2004, it's awesome. But
I think he can bring Borat back.
you think so?
I believe in Borat.
Yeah.
I'm surprised he can still pull it off, considering a big like thing about Borat was that nobody knew that they were being like duped.
Well, yeah, because so in the movie Borat is undercover.
Yeah.
He goes in different disguises. It's Borat playing other characters. That's the joke.
Did you ever see him interview Donald Trump before he was the president?
I actually have not.
You haven't? Look it up on YouTube.
The ice cream gloves.
Yeah, the ice cream gloves. Ali G's is innovation of the century.
Huh. Oh wait, no, I have seen this.
Yeah. He shot him down though because he didn't follow the methodology of the art of the deal. If he did, that would have been a big thing now. We all would be using the ice cream gloves.
Honestly, like he didn't buy it for a minute, which was shocking.
No, he didn't.
Trump's mind is too strong. Trump can't be like trolled by Sacha Baron Cohen. He's like, his brain is too. He's a very stable genius.
He's elevated.
He's like immune to like comedy and satire though. Trump, like you can't like troll him like that. He's not like, he is the satire. You can't do that to him.
Yeah, I mean, he retweeted a video of Joe Biden playing music, but then someone cut in "fuck the police" instead of whatever song Joe Biden played. Like, you can't beat that.
No, you can't. Like, you can't troll Trump. That's the sad. Like, you can troll Hillary Clinton. You can troll Joe Biden. Like, Joe Biden could end up on like Borat too. Like, I could see him like making mistakes on Borat too. If like Sacha Baron Cohen tried to interview Trump, it would just be like, "What is this? What are you talking about?"
Yeah, because satire or like that kind of thing requires some degree of buy-in or some degree of social buy-in that like the person you're talking to respects the social contract. You know?
Exactly.
Like you can't have fun with like a younger sibling or a younger cousin who takes everything too seriously. They just
Trump is both too stupid and too like galaxy brain for this. Like, he's like a savant of some sort.
He's playing 4D chess with one-dimensional pieces. It's pretty awesome.
Definitely, like, I just want to see this. I want him to be like psychoanalyzed. I'm sure this guy's got something going on. Like, this guy, something's like, I don't think we've ever seen anyone like this guy.
I think if they hook him up to a lie detector, it would explode. It wouldn't be able to handle him.
No, I don't even think it would. I don't think he knows he's lying. That's the thing. Like, sometimes I think he just says things through intuition, and he doesn't. Kids lie and they believe what they're saying when they're lying.
Yeah.
When you're a kid and like you're lying, and you don't really know you're lying once you're in the lie.
Oh, it's like Inception, where they get inside the dream, they don't know it's really a dream.
Or like when there's like, "I didn't do it, Mom, I swear," and like you're saying it from your heart.
Yeah.
It's like Trump believes his lies. He does not know the truth. That's my take on that. So he doesn't know what's going on.
Oh, it is being recorded.
Yeah.
This will be on the record.
My name is Oedipus. This is my mama.
What do you think about the Peace Prize? What do you think about the Peace Prize?
That's stupid. That's like dumb. The stupidest thing I've heard in my life.
He won't
win it.
I don't think he will. I think they
stupidest thing I've heard in my life.
Yeah, whether he's qualified or not, I think they're prejudiced against him regardless. So I don't think
anyone commanding the largest fighting force in human history should not be getting the Nobel Peace Prize.
Military doesn't equal no peace.
No, I'm saying like the U.S. president, by definition, is commanding the largest, most violent fighting force in human history.
Yeah, I mean, Obama won it before going into office. I don't know. I think these peace deals are just like
Obama didn't deserve the Peace Prize.
next level.
Isn't that like more warranting of a peace prize, like having the ability to cause chaos and war and not doing so?
No, it's not.
So then just like a guy who's paralyzed from the
Bro,
neck.
we don't have to do that many mental gymnastics. Like Gulf Arab countries are recognizing Israel. They're
Yeah, it is very impressive, but there is.
Wait, Saudi Arabia, first of all, recognizing Israel, like, ooh, big deal. Like,
What do you mean, ooh, big deal? What?
No, it is substantial in terms of it's like you can't really have expatriate Jews in Saudi Arabia, and you certainly can't really facilitate direct economic relations between the countries, which is especially important in Saudi Arabia, at least because they're trying to move away from a hydrocarbon-based economy, because they know that's not going to be substantial or substantive 100 years from now, and they don't want the monarchy to be overthrown if there's a big drop in oil like there was in 2015.
I really wonder who's going to win the Nobel Prize for just like scientific accomplishment during.
Greta Thunberg.
Whoever comes up with the vaccine.
Yeah, I suppose.
well, that would deserve it. But if you come up with a vaccine, that you should get the Nobel Prize.
Yeah. Well, I guess who gets? Are there just a bunch of co-winners?
I don't know. Jonas Salk, I think, won the Nobel Prize for smallpox back in the day, the vaccine for that. But he was working with other people, but he was like the dude they gave it to. I don't know. How many Nobel Prizes are there? There's one for peace, one for chemistry. Economics, yeah, physics.
Literature.
Oh yeah, literature, yeah.
You know who should get like the Nobel Peace Prize? Like, who's I don't even know.
There hasn't been any peace in the past.
They gave the last one to there was a doctor in the Congo who he did something with like helping people who are victims of female genital mutilation, and that's pretty rough work. So that guy I think was deserving, even though it wasn't like macro peace. It was sort of a thing he was facilitating on individual levels between like former militants and like people who had been their victims.
Well, that's perfect. That's the kind of person that we need to scale up a little bit. Like,
yeah, it is. That's why, like, when you were arguing, like, if you're like the head of state, maybe you shouldn't be able to get the Peace Prize. I think there's merit to that, possibly.
Yeah, you're not like you're literally like you're commander of like the most violent like group in the world. Doesn't matter. Like if it's like you're not killing as many people as you could, you're just part of the problem. I don't know.
Well,
like,
no, because that obviates the entire alternative of like the U.S. being a hegemon.
Yeah, it's bad. I mean, it's not bad. It's like it's all bad. It's the best alternative we have. Bro. It's just like you don't get.
No, that means that it's no. But if that's true, and like a great power war would happen without it, then what are we talking about?
You can get a prize for.
And every U.S. president should get the Nobel Peace Prize.
No. You can get a Peace Prize for keeping the current status quo very stable. That's the prize you get.
I don't think they should give it to heads of state at all, and it's not because I disagree with it. I agree with Jack's point to a big extent, but I also agree with yours, RG, because like for instance, I think they actually gave the last Nobel Peace Prize to the president of Ethiopia, Ahmed Abiy, and I think there's a problem when I remember I was reading something that F.A. Hayek talked about when he won the Nobel Prize in economics, where he says it legitimizes the sort of ideology or viewpoints of the winner of the prize. And if that's especially, I think, dangerous for politicians like Ahmed, who's the head of state of Ethiopia, which is not really an open democratic nation. And there was a lot of protest actually after he won the prize, and he kind of cracked down on it. A lot of the media was like, well, he won the prize. He's a great guy. So
I forget her name. Who's Miss Genocide? Like the guy who's against the Rohingya Muslims, that lady.
Oh, Aung San Suu Kyi.
We gave her the Peace Prize. Like, let's just not like that's.
I know. Yeah, she won the Peace Prize, and then she was totally fine when they were going after the Rohingya. So, and she actually championed it. She was like, they don't belong in Myanmar.
Bro,
so
she's part of an ethnic cleansing campaign. That's like the opposite of like everything.
Yeah. It was
Kill all your opponents, then there's peace, right?
I guess so. Yeah. That's what what's his name? We were talking about the ancient Greeks in this class. You know about Thucydides, the Athenian? Yeah. He wrote about the sort of the realism of war, and he wrote about the Peloponnesian War, and he talked about like He's talking about the Athenians massacred all these people on this island called Melos. And they were like, why would they do that? They thought like, oh, well, maybe the gods told them to, or it was like some noble duty. But Thucydides was just like, well, it was advantageous to the Athenians because if they didn't kill everybody there, they would, host a Peloponnesian naval base that would attack the Athenian ships. So it was prudent for the Athenians to wipe them out.
There's a lot of things that make sense within the logic of war. Like it's not like it's like yes, like it's like everything within a certain set of assumptions like makes sense. Like that's something.
I feel like every other prize though is given based on like consequentialism, right? Like if you really intended to get the COVID vaccine and wrote a lot about like giving it freely to everyone, that doesn't get you anything if you just rub two sticks together. But if you
everyone has most successfully changed the paradigm to be closer towards peace, has pushed.
That's the U.S. for the last 4 years.
At the micro level, like whoever that person was who's dealing with the female genital mutilation. That might be.
His name is Dennis NK, and you can look him up after that, Nukweji or something like that.
But I guess my question is like, how do you weigh that against the U.S.?
I'm just saying, like definitionally, you can do. I'm not saying like the logic of the presidency is different. Like you have to like what is your goal here? It's like okay, like prevent wars, like keep our critical interests safe. It's not like peace. It's not peace.
Because when a president does it, it's kind of like he has the whole nation to sort of use, and he has the diplomatic relations. He can work through, supranational organizations. He has a lot more sort of at his disposal or her disposal, or whoever the head of state of a given nation or entity may be. But when you're just like a guy on the ground who does some really like substantial change, that's pretty significant.
Yeah,
so I think
it's not like the Medal of Honor. It's not like the pound for pound like power.
Yeah. I think it's just I don't really have any, like, personally, I don't really care who wins the Nobel Peace Prize. I don't think it means anything, like, in terms of Ahmed, the guy I just talked about, where could very well become an autocrat. He might be an autocrat at this moment, but he has a Nobel Peace Prize. So he's not, it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't really give you credence from the issuance of the prize in and of itself. But I don't know. Give it to individual. Maybe you could have two peace prizes for individual work and for national or international cooperation. Who knows? Or you have no prize, right? Because does it really matter? I don't think it does.
I think Obama was a good president. Like he can get a prize for being a good president. It's not like he's just not part.
But getting the Nobel Prize before being in office was just like.
Yeah, that's the problem with Obama. I'm not trying to hate on Obama here, but he got his prize because of his work at Global Cooperation. Is basically what it states. It's like he helped ease tensions, especially in the Middle East, was like what the prize was directed at. Which is it's kind of on the impetus of he pulled the troops out of Iraq in 2009, which was at least at the time seen as like a really like a big move towards peace in Iraq. But it kind of delegitimized the state of Iraq or the Iraqi government at the time, and eventually indirectly, I don't think Obama was pernicious really in any way. But it led to, the rise of ISIS and the second Iraqi civil war and what happened there. So I don't think it was only within, like what you said, Jack, it was in the first year of his presidency, or even like before he really got into office. So it kind of was.
The prize is decided like substantially before it's actually issued, right?
The prize, I don't know exactly how they adjudicate on these things and go about the voting process, but I don't know. I look at specifically when he won the prize. It was either he won in 08, he won it in 09. He won it, I think, in early 09, or maybe in the fall of 09.
It makes no sense. It's the stupidest thing I've heard in my life. Obama does not deserve the Nobel Peace Prize. That's like stupidest like.
Yeah. No, but like Justin, back to your point that it legitimizes whatever regime or ideology they have. Like that's a huge thing to take into consideration because, like, I mean, obviously we can't see the counterfactual, but like having that under his belt, Obama, like it definitely emboldened him to do whatever.
Yeah, he kind of got it. Yeah,
he got legitimized his actions, even if he was, drone striking civilians. So maybe it's something where it's like you have to give it 5 years down the road after you see like the full actions of an event. Yeah, like maybe 5 years after Trump's deal goes into effect with Israel. See if that actually holds up.
War is
a really good point. Yeah.
The drones was better than what we were doing before. That's all I'll say. It was bad. It was really bad, but it's better than what was going on before.
Is it really bad though?
Like, it's like precision killings of like foreign militants and like, and there's people who get caught in the crossfire. But like,
I mean, you're the head of
troops and destroying whole villages. Like, it's just different. It's just
Remember in 2016? Remember in 2016 when like Trump was like, "I'm gonna take out ISIS," and then everyone was like, "How the fuck are you gonna do that, big guy?" And he's like, "I'm not gonna tell you the plan, but I'm gonna do it." And now we don't talk about ISIS anymore because they're all dead.
But I think like Trump was really just continuing. Like, and once again, I'm not trying to praise Trump or Obama here because I think I don't put a lot of like weight into the actions of the head of state in and of themselves. I think it's mostly due to the institutions that already exist and a lot of other sort of external factors. But like I remember ISIS took over. They made the headlines in June of 2014 after they took over Mosul in Iraq, and then the air campaign started shortly thereafter, and then the sort of increased support for the Iraqi government. And then by 2016, they were really on the back foot. They were being pushed back in Syria by the Russians and Assad, and were getting pushed back in Iraq by the Western coalition. And Trump took office in 2017, and then basically by the end of 2017, early 2018, they were pretty much gone. So it was sort of just a continuation of work from the Obama administration. But I don't think any of them really had like unique strategies they took. I think they basically took the sort of advice of the military staff and just continued it. But
less hands-on with generals. I'm pretty sure he literally just like was like, "Do what you think."
Who Trump said that to the generals?
Yeah, I think Obama was more like, let's try to like play middle ground. I don't know. I think Obama and Trump were both pretty good. I mean, Obama had some foreign policy failures, but for the most part, he was like better than Obama was way better than what I thought Trump would be, like during the campaign. Trump was like, "Hey, let's get out of everything. Let's just leave everyone alone and like trade," but like not really trade.
Well, in terms of Middle East policy, I think Obama was better than Bush, and Trump is better than Obama, just because there's this more and more pulled out of the Middle East by the U.S. There's less involvement by the United States in the Middle East.
I don't know if we're less involved. I just say that we're picking our battles more.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, Trump is kind of an isolationist.
Jack, did Trump stop ISIS? I don't know.
Trump kind of stopped him. I mean,
he like destroyed a couple of militaries, like just these huge missiles. But like,
I think that Trump campaigned as an isolationist, but he's really like, I don't know. He's just not. He's conducting drone strikes, which is based. Struck Soleimani, based. Who's the other guy?
Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi.
Yeah, based. All these decisions were great decisions that panned out, and everyone was like, World War III is going to happen. I'm telling you.
I will say this. I was never against him, like just killing these guys. Like I thought that was awesome. But I do think it's a little. I do think that Democrats made themselves look bad by saying like Trump can't defeat ISIS himself, and like it's going to be a generational war. It's going to be decades, and they just said this before, like during Trump's campaign, because Trump was talking like I'm just going to destroy ISIS, and I don't know if he did, but ISIS was definitely destroyed during his presidency. He definitely killed some significant ISIS leadership. I mean, I'm sure there's more structural failures at hand, but during Obama's presidency, you could see ISIS's territory from space. You could do it was like a country. And it's just there's beheadings in the news every week or something in 2014. It's like, oh my god, what are those guys doing out there? And now you just forgot. So I was
killed ISIS so good. It's not even like a political talking point. He can't be like, I killed that. People will be like, oh, they kind of just went away, right? Like, what? Who are you talking about?
I don't know. I do feel like that. I doubt that he killed. I mean, maybe he was more effective than. Maybe I was wrong.
I mean, I bet that it was a mix. I think that he was more effective than Obama, but Obama wasn't getting cocked by ISIS. He was definitely
Yeah, it was just
taking the upper hand.
I mean,
Yeah,
Trump entered after when some groundwork laid by Obama's administration. I'm sure like some intelligence he was building off of was from Obama, and like I'm sure like they started the wheels rolling. I think what was the first thing they did? Like it was like 2017. He like just sent that missile to that Syrian base or something.
yeah. That had nothing to do with ISIS. That was
Video like over and over again. It was like it was like holy shit. That's
yeah. That was. I remember people thought that World War III was going to start after the thing with Iran at the beginning of the year, but that in 2017 that was a lot.
the Iran thing was pretty close to World War II. People don't realize that. Not the ISIS thing. The Iran thing wasn't a good idea.
No, it was a great idea. Dude, Iran literally didn't even retaliate. They literally like bent over for us the moment he did that.
You can't beat these guys into submission. That's not what you wanted. They could have been we were building like critical normal relations with them under the Obama administration. I'm still a tilt to Iran sort of guy.
But no. But the problem is, say that you can't beat them into submission, and the reason why you can't beat them into submission is that they are rogue actors that hate the U.S. like fundamentally. So
yeah, under Obama, we had them.
So Obama's whole cooperative thing and giving them money and like letting them build it's not a good idea.
We didn't give them money. We unfroze their frozen assets.
Same difference.
It's not.
Same. I mean,
the fact is now we have a whole region that hates the United States, whereas before we had a bunch of liberal urban elites there who were pretty pro-U.S. under Obama. And
kidding me?
That's the problem with Iran, and that's why Iran is really peculiar. Is because Iran
pro-U.S. They were pro-Obama.
Well, no, there's something about what Arjit says is that Iran is weird because it's under an authoritative or totalitarian. Or I'm not going to say totalitarian, but authoritarian theocratic government, right? And but a lot of the people, especially in places like Tehran and Shah Abbas and Isfahan and the major urban centers, there's a lot more. I guess we could call them relatively liberal. Yeah, more secular is what we should say. They're a more secular sort of urban class that, and they were kind of the ones who were really behind the revolution and or partly behind the revolution in 1979, 1978. But then it was kind of co-opted by the mullahs and Ayatollah Khomeini. That's because what we saw in Iran at the end of last year was these huge protests where like 3,000 people died. Right, that the Iranian government put down and killed. And it was like the big, I don't know if you remember, in 2009, there was something called the Green Revolution in Iran, right, where there was a major uprising there. So there's a lot of really significant internal things going on in Iran.
We were not doing this for the Iranian government. We were doing this to build like soft power with Iran. We did like because we had to lifting sanctions.
That doesn't make sense though, because our strategy is geared around. That's why we're allies with Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia is a Sunni.
Why are we allies with Saudi Arabia? They're not even like what do they do?
The Sunnis and Iran wants to kill us way more than the Sunnis do.
Well, our alliance with the Saudis.
That was the point of Saddam too, like to balance Iran.
Number one exporter of Wahhabist terrorism in the region. Okay, they're in a cold war with Iran. We've picked the wrong side, and we've picked too much of one side.
You're telling me Iran is better? You're telling me Hezbollah is better and Hamas is better than Saudi?
I mean, I don't think this is like a weird, because both of them are really bad. Like it's sort of like the alliance with the Soviet Union during World War II, right? Where neither the Nazi German, neither the totalitarians were good. I mean, the Saudi government there's a lot. They're a totalitarian monarchy. There's a lot of Wahhabist and Salafist terrorism that Arjit says comes out of there. It's probably state supported to a significant degree. But then the same thing goes with Tehran, where we got the Iranians who are, supporting Hezbollah and all these other groups.
Hamas. And more pluralist and more liberal than the people of Saudi Arabia. I would say.
I don't know if that's true, but I think
there's like fundamentalists in Saudi Arabia as well.
I don't think it matters.
There are fundamentalists in Iran.
I don't think it really matters what direction we take. Either way, we were going to have to partner. Either way, there was going to be two great forces conflicting with one another, and the West was going to have to back up one of them, right? So
we had to just hedged our bets.
The point is, if you take Iran, the Shia power, and its affiliates, you could say that it's empowered, say like in Iraq, and then you take like all the Sunni countries that are against Iran and pitted them against each other, Iran would like clap them, which is why the U.S. is there.
I'm just saying, man, like we're picking like the side of like, okay, the Israel Saudi Arabia side, right?
Yeah, that's the right side.
Is it though?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, I think you can remove Israel from because the Israel is sort of that's how they were able to broker these peace deals with Israel, because Israel isn't really intimately involved with.
No, they did not want us to do the JSPA. They did not like it at all. That's one of the reasons we got out of it.
Yeah, I know. Israel definitely has vested interest in these things. That's why it's like weird, because it's all interconnected, but there's all sort of the fight between the Sunnis and the Shiites. That's one thing, and then there's also the state of Israel involved, and then that's connected in from one side. But Israel
also a vested interest in keeping the Sunnis and Shia separate. Like, it would really suck if you had a bunch of these countries that were like, okay, first on Saturday, then on to Sunday. Like, kill the Jews first, then the Christians.
You know what we should do?
What?
It's time to just get out of there.
Yeah, I feel like you say that with the spirit of like, let's just fucking see what happens. Like that petri dish over there.
We just leave Iran alone, like Israel alone, and see what happens. Like, I'm not saying like we don't do anything bad to it. We just see what happens. What would happen?
Completely decoupled from the Middle East, there wouldn't be Israel in the next 2 years. I think I'd say.
Yeah, no.
There wouldn't be one.
Like, maybe there's a more stable equilibria there in the long run. I'm kidding. No, we shouldn't do it.
No. I mean, it is interesting. I like to play with the idea of just letting shit happen. Like, you know.
I don't know what would happen because like we're like so deeply like we are like arming like Saudis, the Israelis, like we're sanctioning the Iranians. Like, we've had like we're the number one like factor in that region.
Yeah. All I know is we need a John Bolton presidency, man.
Bro, please stop. You know who you would do? He would do regime change in Iran.
No, he'd first strike them.
That'd be a disaster. A regime change in Iran, that'd be like...
Oh, it wouldn't be a regime change. It would be a first strike on Iran.
Bolton has said regime change in interviews. He said we needed a regime change. He has a group he wants to back regime change. It's called MEK.
Pretty sure he told Donald Trump that we should nuke Iran before they nuke us.
I don't think countries that are nuclear armed will use their nuclear weapons on one another. I don't think so. I think they have too much to lose in using.
It depends on the countries. Like,
no, they don't.
Iran would, because one, they hate the U.S. Two, they might not even use it against the U.S.
But that's like you ever see Dr. Strangelove, right? And I think I only bring this up because I think it's like the most easily accessible example of this is the subtitle of the movie is Why Learn to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, right? I think if one side has nuclear, that's why it's weird, because I don't think we should give nuclear weapons to other states, but I think once a state has nuclear weapons, it's the vested interest of the regime not to use them, because the regime is only concerned with its what do you call it? It's homeostasis, right? It wants to continue to be able to live and function, right? And if they use the nuclear weapon, then
use them against whom? The U.S. has sufficient ballistic missile defense and aerial denial systems that we could like shoot an Iran nuke before it gets to us. But if they were to like nuke, like I don't know, Lebanon or something, like that would just kill everyone there.
Yeah, but no one wants to deploy any sort of nuclear weapon in the first place. That's why it hasn't happened since. It
doesn't happen because we're lucky. We just live in the timeline.
No. Iran is evil. Like, they have an evil ideology. They hate people. Like, they're evil. They don't care if they die, so much so as they kill certain people.
Well, you're correct there. That's correct. That there are people. The regime could destroy the whole world in pursuit of some goal, even if they die.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's the fundamentalism aspect. That's what makes them unique, right? Like,
it's not what makes them unique. It makes like a lot of countries unique.
Like, if you told like Trump, like, hey, you get to like eliminate China, but everyone in the U.S. dies, he'd be like, no, like, no, let's just tariff them. Like, no, let's just do these like, you know, these probing operations, cyber ops, etc. Like, if you told like Iran, yo, you can literally kill the U.S., like kill everyone in the U.S., but all Iranians die, they would do it like in a heartbeat.
I don't think they would, because the mullahs in Iran, like Ali Khamenei, who's the Ayatollah, he's the supreme leader of Iran. he's not going to want to give up his position. He lives a life of luxury. He's not going to want to risk his death.
Osama bin Laden lived a life of luxury.
But bin Laden never put himself in harm's way after he established Al-Qaeda. I mean, that's why he was chilling in a mansion in Pakistan after everything that happened. He would send out, because he was basically manipulated.
The point is that it doesn't matter, because they think that the fundamental point of the theocracy is that they think that they'll be rewarded for destroying the West in the afterlife.
Yeah, but I don't think, like, the leadership, because the leadership always thinks something.
Like, the Vikings didn't care if they die in battle. They'd prefer to die in battle than from, like, sickness.
Okay, but that's like, it's a different thing with the Vikings, right? And
if you die during jihad, you go to heaven.
I know, but especially, I think people, they sort of discount their sort of ideology as their like material well-being improves. I think if you were a great Viking king or any great king, or if you were the Pope even too, and you're preaching